Welcome to another episode of The Artsy Raven, a show about writing and publishing with your host, J.F. Garrard.
Welcome to another episode of The Artsy Raven, and today our special guest is S.J. Barratt. So S.J. is a writer and occasional poet who creates children's books inspired by the natural world. Suzanne lives in Lyon, France, with her partner and son, but feels equally at home hiking in the French Alps or wandering the rugged cliffs of Shetland, Scotland. Much of her work begins outdoors, on long walks and in quiet moments of close observation, where curiosity and imagination sparks inspiration. When she's not writing, she's usually hiking towards somewhere new or attempting to convince her garden that she's in charge. Through her stories and poems, she explores connections, place, and wonder, hoping to spark young imaginations and encourage children to trade Wi-Fi for a little bit more wild life. Today, she's here to talk about her author's self-publishing journey, her middle grade eco fiction series, and to share an excerpt from her audiobook, read by Gill Mills. So welcome, SJ.
Thank you, JF. I'm delighted to be here.
So can you tell us a little bit about your background and what inspired you to be a writer and storyteller?
Yeah, sure. Okay, well, I was always a bookworm, that's for sure, as a kid. I was brought up in England, but born in the US, would you be? Born in the USA, but English parents and childhood in England, sort of an hour from London, so countryside, farming, country, and so on. And basically, my childhood with my sister and friends was walking dogs, riding horses, building camps in the local woods and so on, and being outside as much as possible, which is when I see youngsters these days who are so much in front of screens, whether it's their phone, TV, or gaming, I feel it's such a shame. You know, that was my inspiration for writing my first book in the series, was to get kids outside.
Okay. Now you have a child, correct? And I
I
guess was it
do.
inspired by that? Did that set you on the writing journey?
Well, he's now 23,
Oh,
so
okay.
but he does join me on the hikes. I have managed to transfer a love of hiking to him. And would you believe he has a close friend, and they're at the moment they're on a hike across Lyon. They go from east to west to north to south. So it's wonderful
Oh,
to know that these youngsters who love screens as well. I mean, he's a gamer as much as possible, but he has managed to get a balance of screen and green time, shall we say.
okay. Now, when you're in nature, how does that influence your creative process? Like, does it give you ideas to create your stories? Is that where it comes from?
Definitely. Yes, definitely. I mean, a recent hike in the Alps, shall we say, last summer, well, recent, it was last summer, we saw some animals, and it was just wonderful to stop, to pause, to film them, to look at them, to, to just observe them in their natural habitat is wonderful. So I haven't managed to weave that yet into a book or a story, but it's tucked away in my mind for later new stories basically. But yes, I try and observe nature as much as possible, and it's difficult because it's difficult to stop, isn't it? I mean, you're on a hike, you need to get somewhere, you have people around you, you want to chat, you want to talk, so you need to find that balance of observing nature for sure.
Now, is being a writer your second career? Did you do anything before, or?
Yes, I've worked for many years actually in agriculture. This is, shall we say, my day job. And so I'm moonlighting evening job, weekend job as a writer, but I do hope to work full time very soon.
Okay. Now, how long did it take you to write your first book?
I think I started actually. It was a sort of a writing project first of all when I was convalescing after an operation, and I thought this is my time for writing. This is going to be my writing project, and I basically went down a rabbit hole with research. I was trying to write for kids, and I wanted to write about a farm that would relate to them. And I found the Shetland Islands where they do crofting still, which is like self-sufficient farms. And I thought that's perfect. The small islands, the small scope, to make it all self-sufficient, that is perfect setting for a children's story. And so that's where it started. And I just didn't look back, basically. I started with winter and then I went on to spring. So to answer your question, I think basically, shall we say, it took maybe 6 months to write it. And then I went into the editing phase, hiring editors, first of all, getting an editorial review of the concept and so on. So I think at least a year, shall we say, from A to Z.
Now, after you finish a manuscript, you can also choose to find an agent or a traditional publishing house. Were these options that you considered?
Well, I didn't really know the process at the beginning. And because of working in communications, I usually associate words and images. And so that's what I did. As soon as I had my story together that had been edited and that was presentable, I thought, well, my next step is to find an illustrator. So I did. And I found Jenny Nutborn, who was straight out of university, really, who loved to draw animals. And so I thought she was the perfect fit. So I started working with her. So a few months later, I had the book illustrated and I realized I was too far ahead for reaching out for traditional publishing and so on, because usually that creative part is done by the publishing house. So I thought, okay, well, what's next then? And that's where I went down the self-publishing route because I was too far ahead and I didn't want to lose my story and I didn't want to lose the creative control either, because I love working with an illustrator. I really do, you know, creating the images that are the start of a chapter and creating the cover and so on. So I love that part. I really do. And working with Jenny was fantastic because we learned as we went. You know, she had never illustrated a book either. So it was learning by doing, which is my key activity. And but I think in the future I would like to query, definitely, because it is an interesting process, and self-publishing is difficult. It really is difficult because you end up spending maybe more time marketing and promoting than actually writing.
Well, it's like you're building a house and you have to do everything.
Yes,
That's just one
exactly.
thing, right? So,
Yeah, from the foundations to the walls to the decoration.
yeah. Okay, let's talk about the book that you've produced, Living at the Edge of the World. So this is the winter one.
That's the first
So
one, yes.
tell us a little bit about why did you start with winter and how did you create the world of the Papala?
Yeah, I thought it would be interesting that it's a story about two twins from London, and because I'm from London, well, that was a given. I was told at the beginning, really write about something that you know about. So that's why I was concentrating on agroecology and agriculture and London and so on. And I thought, well, what would be interesting is to take two sort of sophisticated middle-class twins and throw them in the deep end, where there's an island of 30 people, no Wi-Fi. The young girl, she wants to be an influencer, so she's out of sorts. And her brother, however, is delighted by all the science, the birds, the wildlife, and so on the island. So it's a complete contrast. So that was my setting, if you like.
Okay, now can you tell us a little bit about the synopsis of the story? Like you have these twins and then what
They're thrown
happens?
in the deep end. Exactly. They're thrown in the deep end. And basically, I mean, everything is different. The culture in Shetland is almost Viking in some respects because it's closer to Norway and to Greenland than it is to England. So they consider themselves not Scottish. And there is so many interesting facts. For example, the island Fula that inspired me still celebrates that. Well, they're following a different calendar. They're following the Julian calendar. So they're celebrating New Year on the 13th of January. So everything is different. So it's basically the whole book, the first book about winter, is about accepting things that are culturally different and how difference can really be great and interesting, and accepting that difference really is the theme of the book.
Okay. Now, can you tell us a little bit about your process of making the audiobook?
Yes, with Gill Mills. Yes, it's Canopy audiobooks. And so Gill is the narrator. And basically, I interviewed quite a few actresses. And in the end, I chose Gill because she's lived in Scotland, and she didn't do a heavy Scottish accent in the book, but what's wonderful about Gill as an actress is that she has created a different vibe and a different voice for every character. So it really brought the book alive. And so she does recordings, and then I listen to them, and I give her notes and so on. And then she'll redo snippets or whatever if the character is not completely how I imagined and so on. So she's very open to feedback, and the process is really painless. It's a joy, really.
So how do you create the audiobook? Like, do you use software or a website? Or...
I didn't do the creation of it.
Oh,
It
I
was
see.
Gill Mills. Yeah,
Oh,
Gill Mills. She
okay.
did the
Okay.
recording. So basically, she's giving me the recording each time, and I'm giving her feedback. So
I see.
that's why it was so painless.
Yeah, I was like, oh my God, sound editing is very painful.
I know.
But
I
yes.
mean, when I thought about doing an audiobook, I looked into buying all the equipment and everything, and I'm sure I could have done it. I'm sure, but just
This is another thing to do.
Exactly. Sometimes you just want to outsource and delegate because there is too much to do when you're a self-publishing author, for sure.
Now, without giving out too much away, so you have winter as the next one, spring. Are you going in order? Okay.
Yes, I am. I started with winter, to make it even more difficult for the twins to cope with the middle of an island, a remote island. And so now I'm working on summer, and it's finished. It's been edited. It's been developed over a few months, and I did the line editing recently with a great editor called Manda Waller. And the development was done by Siobhan Holmes O'Brien. So they are both two great editors in the UK who really accompanied me. So I really do love working with professional editors. It's so wonderful to get professional feedback on your work. And so basically I'm ready, and now Jenny is working on the illustration and so on. So I was hoping that it could be published like the first day of summer, but I don't know, it's getting close.
Yes, getting closer.
So much to do. But at some point during the summer, it will be published. I have no doubt.
Now, what was the biggest challenge you had on this project that you're doing, of making all these books? What do you think is the hardest thing you've had to conquer?
Well, I think the finding the readers. I think when you're writing for children, what's difficult is the outreach, because you have to market to all the gatekeepers, the parents, the librarians, the teachers, the bookshops, and they're not your readers. So you have to interest them so that then they will talk about the book to their children that they're looking after or whatever. And that is the difficulty. I mean, last year I was lucky to do 4 workshops at a nearby school, a bilingual school, and it was fabulous to be able to talk to more than 80 children. And that was really great to see what they thought of the book, to get their feedback, to hear their questions. It's wonderful, in fact, when you write for children, to be actually allowed to talk to your readers.
Yeah, they're very honest in their feedback. I
very honest. But
they're always telling me things.
Fine. So. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, now what advice would you give to writers who want to self-publish their work?
I think work out what sort of publisher you are, whether and why you want to write and self-publish. What are you looking for? Are you looking for fame? Are you looking for engagement from your readers? Are you looking for money? And I think if you clarify to yourself what you want, I think that helps, I think. Because first of all, it was just a writing project for myself. And then I've started this journey. And I still need to think about what I want from writing and what I want from publishing and so on. But I think I was thinking about it recently because I'm part of Ally. And I won a poem competition, which was great. And I got this book from the organizer of Ally, which is the Alliance of Self-Publishers. And the advice is determine what sort of publisher you are. And I've decided that I'm an engagement publisher. I want people to be engaged about my stories and about my writing. So that's helped me a lot to decide the future.
Have you learned any lessons from publishing independently that you wish you knew about earlier?
Yeah, maybe how difficult it is.
Yeah.
That would have been good. If I'd had a wise publisher to say, are you sure you want to go to the self-publishing? I mean, it is great in a way because you make all the decisions. And that's how I won the poem competition, was talking about freedom, because you are free to be creative. You can decide what you want in your book. You can decide what advice to take from an editor. So you have all the decisions, which is wonderful. You know, you're not like a publishing house that has to align with management, with commercial decisions and so on. So you can put your words out there because it's all up to you. That is the fantastic part. But it is difficult to be visible. It is difficult, as I said, to talk to your readers, to find your niche, to find your readers. So yeah, that's why I think in the future, I would like to try with a different book or different series, maybe young adult, maybe adult even. I would like to try the traditional route just to see how I fare, you know.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us today. And for this episode, we'll have the book reading by Gill Mills, and it was lovely to meet you.
Thank you, JF. It was wonderful to be here.
Living at the Edge of the World. Winter. The Papala Island Adventure Series. Written by S.J. Barratt. Narrated by Gill Mills. Chapter 1. But why? Tabitha flung down her suitcase as they arrived at the terminal and dumped herself down on the case, not caring if she broke the zip. But why? She wailed, burying her head in her hands. Why did our parents decide to go on a world cruise and leave us in the middle of winter? She glanced despairingly at her twin brother, Timothy. He looked up at her, sighing. I don't know. They said it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. He then went back to his reading. And why send us to Scotland, of all places, to see a great-uncle we've never even met? Timothy shrugged and continued reading his book of insects. Do you know anything more than we do? Tabitha asked Heidi, who had been looking after them and attempting to teach them German for the past year. I know your mother has a contract to create social media stories about the trip, and your father said something about writing his next history book. Tabitha nodded. Anything else? I did ask them if I could look after you while they were away, but they said I was too young and should go back to Zurich. So, I'm not happy either. Heidi's shoulders sagged. Maybe it's because you partied with your friends when they were away last time, Tabitha muttered. She turned her back on Heidi and sank further onto her suitcase, covering her face with her hands in despair. The Highlands of Scotland? Seriously? They probably don't even have Wi-Fi. Timothy's head shot up. Tabs, don't you ever listen? We're going to Shetland. Sure, some places have good internet, but where we're headed, it's an island with only 30 people. You'll have to share the bandwidth with everyone. Seriously? Talk about being unplugged. That's why I filled my suitcase with books, Timothy declared. Books? Since when do I read books? Tabitha snorted. Timothy took a deep breath and straightened up, like a professor about to deliver a lecture to a hall full of eager students. Books might be old-fashioned, but they're magic, he said, gesturing grandly. Words only come alive when you use your imagination. You make them jump off the page. He nodded solemnly, clearly basking in the imaginary applause. Then he bent back over his insect book, getting lost again in the world of aspen hoverflies. Tabitha raised an eyebrow. Seriously? She muttered, before letting out a resigned sigh and turning back to scrolling through her phone with a scowl. Goodbye, Heidi. We'll miss you, Timothy cried as she left for her plane. Yes, but not your German lessons, Tabitha murmured to her brother. The twins followed their airline chaperone and boarded their first plane to Glasgow, followed by a tiny second plane to Sundberg before arriving in the southern part of Shetland. It's so windy, Tabitha exclaimed as she went down the steps, her pink glittery jacket almost sailing off her. It's to be expected, Tabs, Timothy said as they walked across the tarmac. We're really far north now. Tabitha shivered and pulled her flimsy jacket closer. How far? About 800 miles from Piccadilly Circus, Timothy replied, glancing at the tiny terminal building ahead. It's so cold, and the sky is so grey, Tabitha complained. Timothy handed his sister the blue woolly hat he was just about to put on his own head. No way! I'm not wearing that! What would my Tick-Snap fans think? Suit yourself. Freeze to death, then. As they came out of the terminal, Timothy looked anxiously at a bus timetable his parents had downloaded for him back in London. Crikes, we've got to catch this bus and another one, or we'll miss the ferry to Papala. And it says here, the next ferry's in 2 days' time. And that's only if there's good weather. No way! Let's get a taxi then, Tabitha cried, indicating a sign in the airport. Timothy glanced up sharply. Just how are you going to pay for a taxi? Tabitha gave her brother a scathing look and held up a credit card. How do you think? Mum's emergency credit card. Timothy and Tabitha, brother and sister. Oh, what a princess, a real blister. The other, a don, a geek, a sage, teaching others, wise beyond his age. Twins by nature, twins forever, left by their parents to learn whatever. Will they benefit? Will they change? Or is the edge of the world too strange? Chapter 2. Ultima Thule. New den, you must be Timothy and Tabitha, the ferrymaster said, extending a hand. I'm Brodie. Your Uncle Thomas sent me to fetch you bairns. Timothy and Tabitha exchanged confused glances. You bairns are in luck today. It's the first time we've been able to make the crossing to the mainland for a couple of weeks. The twins nodded hesitantly. Tabitha felt relieved to have found the ferry waiting for them. They stood with their suitcases while the ferrymaster loaded his boat with supplies. Did you get all that? Tabitha whispered to her brother. Yeah, some of the words were strange for sure. New den? Sounds like now then? Do you think it just means hello? Timothy whispered back. And what does bairns mean? I've no idea. Perhaps told me the dialect would be a mix of Norwegian, Scottish and English. We've had enough trouble with Heidi's German. But why Norwegian? Well, if you looked at Papala on a map, like Pap suggested... Timothy raised his eyes. You'd know that on the right-hand side of Shetland there's Norway, and to the left there's the southernmost tip of Greenland. All right, bossy boots, I was busy with my Tick-Snap postings. I didn't have time for Pap's geography lesson. Well, I think we're closer to Norway than Scotland here, and London is way down south. Yeah, you told me, 800 miles away. Tabitha stuck out her tongue at her brother. For sure we're north. Brodie agreed with the twins as he picked up their suitcases. The ancients said our island, Papala, is at the edge of the known world. Ultima Thule, they called it. The ultimate, furthest point in a journey. I think this journey is far enough for me, Tabitha exclaimed. Honestly, we left home at the crack of dawn, and now we're closer to Norway than Scotland. I want to go back home with a central heating and where I can understand what people are saying. Oh, come on, Tabs, this is an adventure. Timothy punched her arm encouragingly. Pap's told me about the history of Shetland Islands too. So now you've just got to tell me, is that it? Tabitha sighed. Yup, if I don't, my brain might explode. Timothy grinned, slipping into his professor lecture mode again. The Danes gave Shetland to Scotland in the 15th century. What do you mean, gave Shetland to Scotland? You can't give a country away. Well, the Danes couldn't afford the dowry for Princess Margaret of Denmark when she married King James III of Scotland. So instead they pawned the islands, gave them away. Total insult. Tabitha looked at her brother in amazement. How do you know all this stuff? You get more like Paps every day. You're a walking Wikipedia. She flopped back against the seat in the ferry with a groan. You realise it means you're going to be a professor, just like him. My brother, Professor Wiki Tim. The ferry boat was small, with just 12 seats. Brodie directed the twins to sit in the cabin, out of the wind. He cast off the boat from the moorings and quickly jumped aboard amid all the packages and provisions that various islanders had ordered. As the boat sped towards the open sea, the captain saw Tabitha looking nervously at her iWatch to check the time. What do you keep looking at your watch for? Time doesn't matter anymore in Papala. If you're tired, take a nap. We won't arrive in Ham for at least a couple of hours. Tabitha glanced at her brother, hoping to find a hint of shared anxiety about the open sea and the long ferry journey ahead. But his nose was buried once again in his book about insects. Old Thomas mentioned that his niece would be sending her bairns to him for a few months. I also heard your parents have gone off on a world cruise. Yes, they have. But what are bairns? Is that us? Does it mean children?
The Artsy Raven is produced by Dark Helix Press. Introduction voiceover by Chris Gorman. Music by Tim Moore. Please access your bonus content on the Patreon website. Thank you very much for listening, and please stay safe.